Two teenagers walked into a car dealership with nothing but excitement and respect. Minutes later, they were asked to leave due to appearing suspicious. The following day, their billionaire father arrived, not to express anger, but to ensure the incident was publicly acknowledged. The sun was heavy over Tempe that afternoon, one of those dry, slow-moving Arizona days where the heat hums through the concrete. After track practice, Malik Townsend walked alongside his sister Ayanna through the parking lot of Madison Auto Gallery, his gray t-shirt damp against his back. They weren't intending to cause any disturbance. Malik, in fact, had been discussing this visit all week. "I'm not saying I'm getting a car today," he said, adjusting the strap of his gym bag. "But I want to see what they have. Maybe something used, you know?" Ayanna laughed, tossing her braids over her shoulder just to gauge expectations before her birthday. "You really think Dad is going to let you drive yourself to school in a two-door coupe?" "Come on," he smiled, but his steps didn't slow. "Let me dream." The dealership lot was still. Sleek silver sedans were arranged under sun-faded flags. The glass doors reflected the heat, and the two entered as any pair of kids with questions and wide eyes. The air conditioning inside was sharp, a contrast to the warmth outside. A middle-aged man wearing a pale blue dress shirt looked up from behind a counter. His gaze first fell on Malik, then moved to Ayanna. They were neatly dressed, Malik in athletic gear, Ayanna in a simple dress and sneakers. Their appearance was unassuming, quiet. Nevertheless, the man rose quickly. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice concise. Malik, always courteous, approached. "Yeah, just checking out some cars. Maybe looking for something used?" "My birthday is next month, and do you have an appointment?" A man interrupted, already walking toward them. Malik hesitated. "No, we do not allow unsupervised minors in the showroom." He cut in, glancing quickly at a coworker across the room. "Company policy." Ayanna's face shifted. "We're not touching anything." "Still, this is not a hangout spot." His tone had turned colder now. "You can look at the website if you're interested." The silence that followed was thick. Malik started to speak, then stopped. Ayanna's fingers gripped the bag strap with force. "We'll leave," Malik said softly. They departed as such. There was no shouting, no resistance. Only the measured walk back along the sidewalk, with Ayanna holding her breath throughout. She remained silent until they were settled in the back of the Uber before she spoke. "That man regarded us as if we were insignificant." Malik acknowledged with a single, almost imperceptible nod. His jaw tightened. He touched his phone screen, verifying the ride time, and then gazed out the window. Ayanna observed her brother's reflection in the glass. She noticed how withdrawn he had become. He wasn't typically a boisterous person, but this felt different. It wasn't simply quietness, it was control. She remembered seeing that expression on their dad's face once before. "You're not going to tell Dad, are you?" He hesitated before replying. "Malik? I don't know," he finally said. "I don't even know what to call it." It's not like the man had said anything outlandish. He simply didn't want us present. Ayanna reclined. "It seemed unbelievable to me." Neither of them spoke for the remainder of the journey. It wasn't necessary. They were both aware of what had transpired. However, the man at the dealership was completely unaware of who he had just dismissed, and by the following morning, he would discover it. The Uber proceeded through the hills of Paradise Valley, where the houses grew larger, quieter, and more dispersed as they ascended. Ayanna sat with her arms crossed inside the black SUV, the tinted windows shielding her simmering frustration. Malik remained silent, holding his phone with the screen dark. His thoughts drifted away. Their home appeared, a contemporary white and stone house situated behind a private gate. It wasn't ostentatious, but possessed an expensive quality typical of established wealth or astute financial acumen. Their father, Charles Townsend, had constructed his technology company from the ground up, initially offering hardware repairs and Flagstaff before achieving success with a data security startup. Currently, his name appeared in Forbes articles and at Silicon Valley panel discussions. However, locally, he was simply known as Charles. The children entered through the side entrance and placed their belongings on the bench close to the kitchen. The house carried a subtle scent of cedar and fresh linen. Their housekeeper, Mrs. K, looked up from the dining table while folding towels. Hey everyone, is everything all right? Ayana mumbled in response. Malik did not answer. Their father's voice came from down the hall. Malik? Malik appeared in the hallway moments later, still wearing his navy polo, barefoot, and holding tablet. You're back early, he said, giving a shrug. Charles noticed a slump in his son's shoulders immediately, and the way he avoided eye contact. He glanced at Ayana. Her expression conveyed more than she likely intended. What occurred? Malik remained silent. Charles placed the tablet down and crossed his arms. Malik, Ayana exhaled. A man at the dealership stated we were not permitted inside. Charles furrowed his brow. Which dealership? Madison Auto Gallery, located off University Drive. What precisely did he say? Malik massaged the back of his neck. He indicated we weren't allowed to browse. He mentioned they don't allow individuals under the age of 18 without a parent present and accused us of loitering. Charles remained motionless for a considerable time. His eyes narrowed a little, not in anger, but with concentration. That measured, careful assessment that indicated he was anticipating 2 or 3 moves ahead. What did you do? We left, Malik stated. We didn't want to create a disturbance. That was impactful. Charles inhaled deeply, moved into the kitchen, and poured a glass of water. He offered it to Malik before speaking again. You acted correctly. Do you understand? Malik affirmed once. Then, his father settled onto a counter stool and looked squarely at him. Please understand this. You are not inferior to anyone. I'm not concerned if you arrive in athletic wear or formal attire. Maintain your composure. And if someone perceives you as a cause for concern, that is their responsibility, not yours. Ayana rested against the fridge, observing. Charles continued, his voice calm and measured. However, you also need to be aware of this. Quietude does not invariably signify strength. Occasionally, allowing minor offenses to occur enables their repetition, first with one individual and then with another. Malik's throat tightened. What's the plan? Charles didn't respond immediately. He surveyed them both, then rose and retrieved his phone. I'm going to speak with someone, Ayana said, surprised. With whom? Charles replied, departing the room. The subsequent hours until tomorrow morning unfolded with an unusual calm. There were no shouts, no hurried phone calls. Charles prepared dinner, as always, grilled salmon, asparagus, and rice. They ate together as a family. A change was palpable. It wasn't animosity, it was determination. That night, Malik lay awake, gazing at the ceiling for a considerable time before finally falling asleep. He didn't fully understand what his dad intended with the discussion, but he sensed it would be more impactful than any outburst. Meanwhile, at the dealership, the manager remained unaware that trouble was brewing. Madison Auto Gallery commenced business at 9 a.m. promptly. As early as 8:45, employees began arriving, their keys jingling, coffee cups in hand, and sunglasses still on. The typical Monday routine. Derek Holton, the assistant sales manager, rested against the front desk, sipping his iced Americano and checking his phone. He no longer recognized many of the names of his inbox. Employee turnover was significant. The position offered good compensation for those who could sell, and he was a skilled salesperson. By 9:03, there was one customer in the parking lot. A navy blue Rolls-Royce Phantom shimmered in the Arizona sun. It did not enter a standard parking spot. It did not wait in the rear. It moved smoothly to the front doors and stopped. Initially, no one exited the vehicle. Derek looked at the receptionist, then walked around the desk. Are you expecting someone? He inquired. She replied, her gaze fixed on the car, no. Then, the door opened. A tall man emerged, wearing a dark blazer, sharply tailored slacks, and shoes polished to a mirror shine. He moved deliberately, with composure. Without preamble, he pushed the glass door open and paused at the entrance. Good morning, he stated, his voice smooth yet resolute. I'm seeking a manager. Derek hesitated. I'm the assistant manager. How may I assist you? The man fixed him with a direct gaze. You're not the person I require. At that moment, Kyle Linson, the general manager, emerged from the adjacent office. He was tall, red-faced, and perpetually seemed stressed. Morning, he said quickly. I'm Kyle. What can I do for you? The man retrieved a card from his jacket pocket and offered it. Kyle read the name deliberately. Charles Townsend, founder and chairman. TNS Global. He looked up, a flush rising on his face. Wow, sir. I wasn't expecting," he stammered. "I imagine you weren't either," Charles replied, stepping further inside. "I won't take much of your time." Kyle indicated his office, his eyes briefly darting towards Derek. We could talk in here." But Charles remained still. No need for privacy. This is a public place. "I'll speak briefly." Kyle nodded, appearing uncomfortable. "Naturally. Please proceed." Charles surveyed the showroom. "Yesterday, 2 children entered. One was my son, the other my daughter." Kyle blinked. His throat moved. "I understand. They were informed they couldn't browse, that they should depart, that this establishment wasn't suitable for them." "Sir, we have—" Charles raised a hand. "I'm not here to debate. I'm not seeking a reimbursement. I experienced no loss yesterday. But you did. You missed an opportunity to act justly towards 2 young people, individuals raised to show respect for others, regardless of how they are treated in return." Several other employees had begun to move nearer, feigning to organize documents or wipe down surfaces. Charles continued, "My children are not disruptive. They are thoughtful, intelligent, raised with care, and they don't require your approval. However, they deserve to be regarded as people, not as dangers." Derek looked down at his shoes. The receptionist had ceased typing. Kyle cleared his throat. "Mr. Townsend, if I may, I'm not requesting an apology," Charles stated. "Apologies are simple. The crucial aspect is what one believes when no one is observing. The choices one makes when they presume no one will question them." He paused, allowing the silence to linger. "Because next time it won't be my children. It could be someone who lacks a father with connections to the media. They will leave this place with a memory that will likely remain unspoken, yet it will stay with them for the remainder of their lives." Then he turned to depart. But just before opening the door, he added, without looking back, "You can sell luxury without being small. I hope you understand how." Outside, a small gathering had formed. 2 individuals were recording on their phones, one local reporter acting on a tip, and a woman holding a microphone. Charles had not alerted them. The news had simply spread. A change permeated the air, not in temperature, but in feeling. Charles descended onto the dealership pavement with calm, measured steps. His expression remained steady despite the small group gathering. 2 college students from a local school stood apart, their phones out, quietly speaking to one another. A reporter from KXME5 News was already in the process of speaking, murmuring in her microphone, uncertain if she was broadcasting live. Charles did not raise his voice. He did not seek out a podium. He paused close to the entrance, straightened his jacket, and began to speak. "I hadn't intended to offer any words today. However, I understand the nature of things. If I remain silent now, another will attempt to voice my thoughts." He raised his gaze, observing the limited faces present. "My son, Malik, and my daughter, Ayana, arrived here yesterday afternoon. They were quiet. They didn't disturb anything. They came here to observe. Like any other young person with a flicker of anticipation and a hope in their heart, his voice remained steady. It wasn't booming, it was gentle. So gentle, it compelled people to draw closer. Yet they were asked to depart. Not for violating a regulation, not for handling something inappropriately, but because someone determined they didn't fit, that they presented an issue before they uttered a single word. The college student clutching the phone released a quiet, trembling sigh. Charles continued, "I've worked my whole life to build something that would last. And I've taught my children that what you build doesn't just sit in your bank account. It lives in how you treat people, in the everyday decisions, the ones you make when nobody's watching." He paused again, not for drama, but because the next words meant something. "Yesterday, someone looked at my children and didn't see who they were. They saw who they assumed they were, and they dismissed them. It's possible to be disrespectful without raising your voice. Sometimes it's about making someone feel diminished in a place they were eager to enter." Behind the glass doors, Kyle stood watching, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Charles glanced over his shoulder briefly, then returned his attention to the people ahead of him. I'm not suggesting anyone should boycott this establishment. I don't endorse that approach. I'm no longer even feeling anger. I am simply weary of observing this recurring behavior. It's deeply troubling to see young people treated as if they've committed crimes before any wrongdoing has occurred. Such experiences leave a lasting impact. Silence allows these situations to persist. Several more people paused on the sidewalk. A delivery person across the street adjusted their sunglasses to observe more closely. I came today because my children should not have been subjected to that kind of treatment, and because I want them to understand that when something is wrong, it shouldn't be ignored. You confront it with clarity, with dignity, and without allowing it to change who you are. He retreated towards a Rolls-Royce, his hand resting on the door handle. One more point. My kids left yesterday, holding their heads high. That speaks volumes about their character and reveals nothing about the person who attempted to diminish them. He entered the car and remained silent. The onlookers did not offer applause. There was no clapping. A stunned silence filled the space as everyone absorbed the information, the visuals, and the implications. Inside the dealership, Derek lowered himself into a chair. The receptionist's eyes were brimming with tears, and she couldn't explain why. Kyle Linson stayed near the window, his arms held rigidly at his sides. Yet, he understood that it was no longer possible to manage the narrative. By that afternoon, the first video appeared on Twitter, followed by Instagram, and then the news. The story began to develop independently. By lunchtime, the story had moved beyond local coverage. A shaky vertical phone video, initially recorded by college freshman Tori Clements, had already garnered over 2 million views on X. The accompanying caption stated, "This man just entered a dealership that disrespected his kids and addressed the situation with remarkable composure." I'm truly speechless. Viewers weren't simply sharing the video, they were analyzing it, pausing specific moments, magnifying details, and engaging in discussions and debates within comment threads. A woman from Flagstaff shared a story, noting that Charles Townsend repaired her father's laptop in 2001 and refused payment. She described him as having always been exceptional. However, other reactions were less charitable. One anonymous user, whose profile picture featured an eagle, questioned why the children hadn't disclosed their father's identity, suggesting a desire to portray themselves as victims, which led to the situation escalating. The story subsequently appeared on morning talk shows. During a segment titled, "Billionaire Father Calls Out Discrimination at Tempe Car Dealership," Good Morning Phoenix reported that the dealership's Yelp rating plummeted from 4.2 to 2.1 within hours. Numerous one-star reviews appeared quickly. Customers cited concerns like rude and dismissive staff, feeling that a teenage son was treated like a criminal and vows to never return. Some reviewers claimed that unless one is wearing a suit and tie, they would be asked to leave before speaking. Naturally, the negative response wasn't solely from unfamiliar reviewers. Community organizations also started focusing attention on the situation, advocating for discussions regarding young people, societal views, and implicit prejudice. Amidst this, the dealership issued a response. This was a brief, 2-paragraph apology published on their website and Instagram page, stating, "We regret the recent experience that took place at our showroom and are actively reviewing our policies. We strive to provide a welcoming environment to all guests and take these matters seriously." The reactions online spoke volumes. The regret appears to stem from exposure rather than genuine remorse. Instead of policy review, perhaps employee evaluation is needed. This apology lacks sincerity, resembling a fine instead of an expression of concern. Privately, Kyle Linson was working to manage the situation. He had already contacted 2 PR consultants, both of whom advised him to minimize communication, avoid public attention, and refrain from attempts at damage control. However, online sentiment disregarded PR strategies. The public demanded openness, accountability, and concrete steps. While Malik and Ayana remained at home, their phones buzzed incessantly with messages, some from friends and others from unknown numbers. Ayana showed her brother a message that elicited laughter, even amidst the circumstances. "Girl, is that your dad on the news?" Tell him to run for office or something. I'm dead. However, more difficult messages soon followed. Why didn't y'all just walk away? One read, ain't nobody owes you a car. Another stated, not everything is about race. A final message simply asked, he probably thought you were skipping school. So what? Rich people want sympathy now? Malik glanced at his screen, his jaw clenched. Ayanna touched his shoulder. Don't read that, he mumbled, not looking up. He continued scrolling. Their father entered the room, carrying 2 mugs of tea. Put the phone down, Charles said. Just for now. Malik paused, then placed his phone face down on the table. Ayanna did the same. Charles sat opposite them, leaning forward a little. Ayanna frowned. You two didn't ask for this, but sometimes life decides your story's bigger than just you. But we didn't even do anything, she added. We just walked in. I know, he replied. That's what makes this so real. You did everything right. And still, someone saw you wrong. Malik stared at the tabletop. Is it always going to be like that? Charles paused, letting the question linger. No, he said, but you'll face it again. And when you do, you decide who you want to be in that moment. Reporters continued to gather outside. Inside, a feeling deeper than anger began to develop, awareness. And awareness is a persistent force. As the sun descended behind Camelback Mountain, it stretched shadows across the towns and backyard. It had been 2 days since Charles spoke at the dealership, 2 extended, peaceful days filled with news coverage, messages, and public commentary. Yet, shielded by the hedges, a sense of calm prevailed. Charles stood by the grill, methodically flipping salmon fillets. Malik was seated at the patio table, his elbows on his knees, gazing out across the lawn. Ayanna was leaning against the railing, her face hidden within her hoodie. There were no cameras, no inquiries, just family. You know, Charles began, without looking up when I was 16, I saved for 2 years to purchase my first car, a 1994 Corolla. It was faded red and had manual windows. Ayanna looked at him. You mentioned it didn't have AC, correct? Charles chuckled. None at all. A Phoenix summer nearly cooked me. But I cherished that car. I received that treatment not because of kindness, but because I deserved it. Malik finally glanced in my direction. Have you ever experienced something like that? Like we did? Charles acknowledged with a single nod. More times than I can recall. Being followed when entering stores. Being ridiculed when applying for bank loans. I was once refused service at a diner in Tucson. I was there with my code books in my lap, and I simply departed without a confrontation. But why didn't I respond? Malik inquired, mirroring my current reaction. Charles then turned another fillet. I didn't believe my voice held weight previously. I felt that remaining unnoticed was the sole path to progress. He paused, but I was mistaken. The grill emitted a quiet hiss. The truth is, son, enduring enough disrespect can lead you to forget what it feels like to be acknowledged. And I never desired that for you, nor for your sister. Ayanna took a seat next to her brother. You certainly ensured we were noticed. Charles now addressed them both. Being noticed isn't sufficient. One must be prepared for the consequences. The acclaim, the disapproval, the individuals who will support you for taking a stand, and those who will oppose it. Malik glanced at his hands. I never intended for it to become an issue. I simply wished to observe a car. I understand, Charles stated. That's what makes it significant. You weren't seeking attention. You were simply living your life. And someone objected to the appearance of that. They paused briefly. I am proud of you, Charles added. Both of you. Ayanna shrugged. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't attempt to demonstrate anything. You simply remained genuine, she said. It didn't seem courageous. It shouldn't, he responded. Courage is often understated. It's about not compromising your integrity in a world that occasionally lacks it. A quiet stillness enveloped the yard. Then Ayanna smiled. So, are we still searching for a car or what? Charles grinned. I anticipated you would inquire. Malik straightened up. Are you serious? Charles threw a set of keys onto the table. They fell near Malik's hand with a quiet clink. Check the garage tomorrow, he said. But it's not about the car. It's about who you become while driving it. That matters more than anything with an engine. Ayanna leaned into her brother, teasing. You better not crash it on the first day. Please, Malik shot back. I'm driving like it's made of glass. Charles laughed, and for the first time in days, the weight of the moment began to ease. Some stories conclude with anger, others with quietness. But this one concludes with a lesson. Sometimes the most effective way to respond is to remain upright, peaceful, truthful, and acknowledged. If this story evoked a feeling in you, share it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that challenge, connect, and remind us who we truly are. It was assumed she would be vulnerable, simply another black woman living alone. What they failed to realize was that she had support monitoring their every action. The moving truck arrived on a Tuesday, late morning. This was a time when most people were at work or running errands. However, in Roseville, California, early retirement and home offices meant that people observed everything. And someone was already observing from across the street before the lift gate even touched the driveway. Rochelle Carrington, age 42, stood beside her black SUV, a clipboard held in her hand, offering the movers hushed directions. She was tall, with a self-assured stance and a tranquil gaze, moving with the grace of someone who conserved her energy. Her attire consisted of jeans, boots, and a long-sleeved t-shirt, marked with a small breakfast stain, a detail she disregarded. This was not a display of style. It was the beginning of a new phase in her life. She had finalized the purchase of the two-story home just 1 month earlier. It featured a Spanish tile roof, beige stucco, and neatly trimmed hedges. This was a place that declared, "I built this," and she had, though not as her neighbors imagined. The first visitor was a tall man wearing khaki shorts and a golf cap. He identified himself as Douglas Varnell, the head of the HOA. His handshake was brief and impersonal, and he avoided eye contact. "Are you moving in by yourself?" he inquired, observing the security camera boxes near the front door. "No, not everyone is here yet." "Well, if you need anything..." "We maintain order here," Douglas stated, briefly looking at the SUV before departing without acknowledging her. She observed him vanish behind his hedges. By sundown, Rochelle had unpacked sufficiently to consider the space habitable. Her home office was established, blinds were in place, and the kitchen was supplied. There were no signs, no music, and no boisterous visitors. Only her. Some plants adorned the porch, and a single folding chair was present. The following morning, a note was slid beneath her doormat. Reminder: all porch decor must adhere to HOA regulations. Flags, religious items, and political messages are prohibited. No name, no signature, just that. She chuckled. She didn't have a flag displayed, only a hand-painted ceramic sun her niece created in art class. It was hung askew beside the door. That afternoon, while adjusting her mailbox height, as the HOA had noted it was non-uniform, she observed a woman in yoga pants walking her dog slowly past her house. The dog paused, sniffing the grass, and the woman's gaze lingered a moment too long. "You new here?" the woman asked. "Looks like it," Rochelle responded, straightening. The woman offered a strained smile. "Well, the HOA is quite particular. It helps maintain the appearance of the neighborhood." "I'm familiar with the guidelines," Rochelle stated. The woman chuckled, but the sound lacked warmth. "That's good. We value a specific aesthetic for our neighborhood." The implication was unmistakable. Unbeknownst to them, beyond any prediction they could make, she had done more than simply read their book. She had studied classified briefing reports capable of disconcerting a senator. She had overcome language barriers, handled explosives, and participated in clandestine negotiations in countries she couldn't disclose. A neighborhood association would not deter her. Nonetheless, something felt amiss. She had relocated frequently, new towns, new cities, but the welcome felt staged. A forced pleasantness, conversations tinged with observation. Consequently, she installed the cameras, not out of suspicion, but out of readiness. One positioned above the door, another at the side entrance, and two angled in the front yard, addressing areas overlooked by most. That night, she stood on her porch with a glass of water, observing the street lights activate. A breeze rustled the leaves, and a lone car passed slowly, increasing its speed once it cleared her driveway. She felt no immediate danger, but also lacked a sense of ease. She dispatched a brief message from a disposable phone to a contact listed as Deb's Plumbing. Message content: settle incomplete. Activity already odd. Logging first flags. Standby. There was no response. She didn't require one. However, despite the stillness of that first week, Rachel sensed that the tranquility wouldn't persist for long. Within the second week, a subtle unease began to develop. The first sign was a formal notification affixed to her mailbox concerning parking regulations. The notice stated, "Driveway must be kept clear of oversized vehicles. Please use garage for storage." Her SUV was properly positioned, not obstructing pedestrian access, not encroaching on a neighbor's property, and it accommodated comfortably within the driveway. She removed the notice and placed it in the recycling bin. The following day, an unfamiliar man stood at the edge of her lawn, arms crossed, observing her as she watered the succulents in front of her bay window. "Hello," she called out. He remained silent, simply staring, before slowly walking away. That night, a second note appeared, printed entirely in capital letters. It read, "No unauthorized vehicles. Surveillance is active. HOA monitors street traffic." Surveillance. The irony caused her to laugh. She reviewed the surrounding area once more. Everything appeared normal, with the exception of a mounting feeling that someone, or multiple individuals, disapproved of her presence. Several days passed, and then the police arrived. It was shortly after 6 p.m. golden sunlight illuminating the porch. A patrol car stopped and parked directly in front of her home. Two officers, courteous but formal, approached. "Ma'am, we received a call regarding a disturbance," one of them stated. "Reports of loud arguing." She blinked. "I reside alone. Are there any visitors this evening?" "No. You are welcome to verify." They did not enter, but they recorded a few observations and then departed. 15 minutes elapsed before she observed Douglas Varnell once more. Identical khaki shorts, same gait. He did not approach the door this time, merely stood close to his mailbox, engaged in conversation with a woman in yoga pants. Both glanced towards her. Rachel opened her front door and stepped outside, signaling that she was aware of their presence. Douglas nodded once. "Just checking to ensure everything is all right over there," he called out. "I'm all right," she responded. "Good, you know. The police visit when things don't conform to the regulations. Noise complaints, misuse of property. I pay the same fees as everyone else," she stated calmly. He raised his eyebrows, seeming to consider that a provocation, and then returned to his messaging. Later that week, the trash collection bypassed her house completely. While every other container on the street was serviced by sunrise, hers remained uncollected. She contacted the sanitation department. There was no record of a missed pickup request, they stated. "This might seem unusual," she commented, "but is it possible someone reported my house as vacant?" The woman speaking on the phone hesitated briefly. "Indeed, yes. That's what appears in the notes." Rachel took a slow, deliberate breath. "I reside here. We will resolve this." She ended the call and returned to her porch, holding her phone, the camera light blinking gently above. That evening, her back fence gate was discovered slightly open. Not fully, but enough to indicate someone had attempted to open it. The lock still engaged when she tested it, but the chain showed a new abrasion, as if it had been pulled. This was sufficient for her. She accessed the encrypted tablet she kept in a locked drawer in her home office and started a low-level alert. Possible harassment escalation. Passive monitoring began. Authorization to activate detail? Moments later, a reply. Authorization approved. Detail shifting from secondary to active. Karina Bell had lived 2 doors down for years. She was a retired postal worker who enjoyed begonias and frequently discussed her needs, seemingly avoiding conversations about politics. However, the residents of Briar Hollow Court were unaware that Karina had previously worked in logistics within international security, a confidential role originating from Langley many years prior. She was indebted to Rachel, a significant debt. That favor had now been requested. The following morning, Karina arrived at Rachel's door, presenting a basket of muffins and a quiet smile. She mentioned she thought you might appreciate some company, Rachel said. Rachel agreed, and moved out of the way. I'm assuming you're not simply visiting? Karina asked, drawing closer. I'm already diverting 2 drones away from your land. The homeowners association isn't your sole concern. Before Rachel could inquire about her meaning, a knock sounded at the door. And this time, it wasn't Karina with baked goods. It was 4:42 p.m. when they arrived, not in a squad car, not in a designated homeowners association vehicle. A silver sedan, notable for a cracked front headlight and excessively tinted windows, pulled up. 2 men exited the vehicle. They wore khaki pants and tucked-in polo shirts, each with laminated badges attached to their belts, badges that appeared cheaply made. One held a clipboard. The other feigned taking photographs of her yard with a phone. Rachel recognized this pattern. She had witnessed similar encounters previously, not in the suburbs, but in Havana, in Berlin, and in Port-au-Prince. The imposter, the bullying tactic, the unauthorized figure who falters when challenged. She unlocked her door before they even reached it. Karina remained inside, seated peacefully on the living room couch, enjoying tea as if it were a typical Wednesday. "You must be Miss Carrington, the one with the clipboard," she stated, her tone dripping with false sweetness and a sense of superiority. "We're with the Briar Hollow HOA Enforcement Committee. We have a few items to discuss with you." Rachel rested against the doorframe. "Your badges are not scanning. You are not listed in the directory, and the HOA does not conduct in-person visits without a 72-hour notice." The man blinked, surprised she didn't react. "Ma'am," he said, adjusting his tone, "your porch has items that are not permitted, and we're receiving multiple complaints regarding frequent visitors." "Is that against the rules?" she asked, remaining still. The second man advanced. "We require you to step outside. We want to review the violations with you." "No, thank you." The first man's smile disappeared. "We're simply attempting to assist you in preventing fines. This situation could worsen. I find that unlikely." They shared a glance. Then, the expression changed. Without speaking, they moved quickly. One attempted to grasp her arm. The other reached for the screen door. Karina reacted before they made contact. "Back away," she stated firmly, moving with a skill unexpected of a retiree. Her phone was already in her hand, her thumb activating a sequence other than calling 911. "Who the hell are you?" one of the men demanded. "Back up," Karina said. The man pulled the door open forcefully. Rachel remained still. She didn't cry out. She didn't retaliate. She turned a little and pressed her hand down firmly on his wrist, securing her grip with her thumb tucked in and her elbow bent. It was a precise maneuver learned from her training. The man swore, taking a step back. "Enough," Rachel said softly. They weren't prepared for that. The second man recovered quickly. He moved forward again, but the sound of tires on gravel caused all three to stop. 2 dark SUVs entered the street. There were no sirens, no lights, and no identifying markings, only a calm, consistent approach. The men glanced back, attempting to assess the situation. "You can run," Rachel stated, "but it will be more difficult." The men remained still. One appeared to be breathing heavily, while the other attempted to appear composed. Shortly after, both SUVs stopped. For people emerged, 2 from each vehicle, dressed in ordinary clothing and wearing sunglasses, with no visible weapons. They proceeded together, swiftly and effectively. The individual holding the phone attempted to flee. He managed 6 feet before being restrained, with his arm twisted behind his back and his phone sliding across the pavement. The person with the clipboard made no attempt to resist. He simply sat down on the porch step, as if his confidence had been abruptly removed. One of the agents, a slender man with graying hair, addressed Rachel. "Miss Carrington, are you all right?" She affirmed her well-being. Minimal physical contact. No injuries were sustained. The camera recorded the entire incident. "Excellent," he stated, then turned to Karina. Karina shrugged, acknowledging the notification. The timing felt correct. Within 10 minutes, the 2 individuals posing as law enforcement officers were secured, their identities confirmed, and they were positioned on the curb, resembling reprimanded children. Residents started observing from behind curtains. Several opened garage doors and lingered in the darkness, feigning sweeping activities. No one intervened. Even Douglas Varnell, the taller of the two men, now in handcuffs, finally spoke. "We were just trying to make sure the neighborhood stayed safe." "From what?" Rachel inquired. He remained silent, but his eyes' movement towards the Douglas Varnell house indicated his intentions clearly. The other man's gaze directed at Douglas Varnell's house was observed. It wasn't missed by Rachel. It wasn't missed by the agents. It wasn't even missed by Karina, who now stood quietly beside the porch steps, arms crossed, her eyes fixed on the street as if observing a chessboard illuminate. An agent, a woman in her late 30s with a distinct New Jersey accent, overheard the interaction. She gave a single nod to her colleague and walked along the sidewalk towards Douglas's front door. He did not respond to the knock. Shortly after, the agent requested a second team. There were no sirens, only unmarked vehicles as previously. It was a display of clean, cold, silent efficiency. By this time, several more neighbors had emerged, remaining close to mailboxes and speaking quietly among themselves. None of them moved closer to the house. Rachel remained seated on her porch, still and observant, watching the events transpire. Karina stood beside her, a hand gently touching the porch rail. "He never was that bright," Karina murmured. "You know him?" Rachel inquired. "Not personally, but I've been observing his cameras for weeks." Rachel lifted an eyebrow. "The ones he stated were for wildlife?" "Yes." It was peculiar how the wildlife seemed to resemble women walking their dogs or brown children on bicycles. The clipboard guy was escorted into one of the SUVs. The other individual, identified as Ronan Kessler, had a sealed juvenile record and resided just outside city limits. Both were hired laborers, not residents. However, their paychecks provided a lead. One of the agents returned to the porch, crouching to Rachel's eye level. "We are currently reviewing surveillance footage. Your neighbor across the street has cameras. We are obtaining access through municipal override." The agent paused. "Do you think he is connected?" "I believe whoever is orchestrating this considered you an easy target." Rachel gazed across the street. Douglas's front window blinds were now closed completely. "You're going to find this surprising," the agent stated. "Situations like this, they occur more frequently than one might assume. Fabricated HOAs, independent residents, private contractors, all operating discreetly. However, they selected the incorrect address this time." Karina quietly laughed. "Absolutely." An hour elapsed, and the federal agents possessed sufficient evidence to knock on Douglas's door. This time he responded. Rachel didn't hear everything that was said, but she observed his expression when he understood this extended beyond a local matter. He was questioned about payments routed through a shell company, the number of anonymous police calls he had recorded from his residence, the fabricated notices, and the bogus HOA violations. He attempted to dismiss the inquiries. He supposedly stated, "Just doing my part to keep things orderly." However, order wasn't the core issue. The problem wasn't about porch decorations or SUVs. The difficulty arose because someone such as Rachel Carrington, given her measured actions and unwavering composure, undermined the sense of authority some residents valued in areas like this. They were unaccustomed to someone who didn't require their validation. Now, each of their methods had been recorded, the timing noted, and data compared. Returning to the porch, Karina moved nearer. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Raquel replied. "But I'm weary of this routine." Karina offered a slight smile. Perhaps a rewrite is in order. By evening, news had circulated. 2 arrests were made, a federal investigation commenced, and a request for voluntary interviews was sent to several homeowners on the block. Remarkably, no one questioned how Rachel had reacted so swiftly or why tactical agents had arrived in less than 10 minutes. They were unaware of the agency clearance, the debt of gratitude, or the discreet surveillance that had been ongoing for the past 5 weeks. Most importantly, they didn't realize who they were confronting as what seemed like a simple removal became a public event. Now, it was impossible to ignore what lay hidden just below the surface. By the next morning, the neighborhood felt shaken. It was evident in the closed garage doors, in the disrupted routines of morning walkers, and even the talkative couple on the corner remained silent. The normal pace was broken, and everyone understood the reason. Rachel was on her porch once more, holding coffee and with one leg crossed. There was no music, no book, only observation. She had experienced observation previously, in locations where a smile directed at the incorrect individual could result in detention. However, here in Roseville, the interactions followed a subtle understanding. Neighborhood expectations, community principles, safety anxieties, harassment disguised in a cardigan. Karina approached mid-morning, a file held beneath her arm. She remained silent until she was seated. They were digging deeper than I thought, she said. We caught 3 more devices near your yard, hidden in sprinkler heads. Rachel blinked. They planted audio? Worse, motion sensors, thermal reads. Somebody was building a case for something, or pretending to, from across the street. Another neighbor, an older woman named Leanne Price, peered through her curtains. This time, she didn't flinch when their eyes met. She was the one who called the cops on you. Twice, Rachel said quietly. Karina refrained from questioning how he possessed that information. Later that afternoon, a federal vehicle made a return visit, this time carrying official documents, subpoenas. The investigation had broadened. An examination of Douglas Varnell's finances uncovered a series of payments directed to private neighborhood enforcement agents working through a business named Civic Harmony Consultants, LLC. Their actions extended beyond simply fabricating HOA credentials. They were components of a loosely structured system designed to instill intimidation. This operation wasn't recent, nor was it particularly well concealed. The matter simply hadn't faced scrutiny before. Until now. Now, with a formal federal document involved, it was receiving serious consideration. A representative from the HOA board arrived later that day, appearing distressed. A quiet woman, Marisol Dupree, holding a notepad and offering apologies frequently. We weren't aware, Miss Carrington, she said. Douglas managed all enforcement concerns. We hadn't authorized any personal visits. He informed me you had, Rachel said. Marisol averted her gaze. I am truly sorry. Please don't apologize. Rachel emphasized the need for transparency, stating, let people know what happened. We will. Before Marisol departed, she hesitated at the foot of the porch steps. If it means anything, we're grateful you didn't retaliate, that you remained calm. Rachel responded, I didn't remain calm. I remained prepared. News of the incident spread beyond the cul-de-sac. By the weekend, a local news van arrived. The reporter did not make contact, simply filming discreetly from a distance until federal agents requested they depart. The incident was already gaining traction online. A recording from a neighbor's Ring camera captured a portion of the confrontation, including the fake HOA badge, the shouting, and the takedown. When the clip appeared on social media, it ignited widespread anger. This wasn't solely due to what occurred with Rachel, but also because the situation resonated with many. Messages flooded in from across the country. One person shared, "This happened to my dad in Austin." Another recounted a similar experience in Phoenix, noting that the police sided with the HOA. The pattern of individuals wielding rules as a tool, it's a genuine problem. The streets of Roseville became a subject of discussion, not due to their well-maintained lawns or excellent school ratings, but because of what occurs when private power believes it can operate without accountability. Later that night, Karina brought over 2 glasses of wine. The sun had set. The porch light hummed gently above them. You thinking about moving? She asked. No, Rachel said. Not yet. Karina nodded. Good, because it's different now. They know someone's observing from a distance, but the significant change wasn't among the neighbors. The realization dawned on Rachel. She understood how silence allowed them to operate and how a carefully chosen reply could effectively halt that activity. 2 days elapsed before a discreet meeting occurred at an unremarkable building close to the Sacramento Municipal Complex. There was no media coverage, no sensational announcements. Simply a table, 4 chairs, and 3 individuals who possessed a true understanding of how things functioned. Rachel was positioned at the far end, wearing all black and with a manila folder placed before her. Directly facing her was Agent Colin Braddock, the lead investigator for the now-active federal inquiry into Civic Harmony Consultants. A DHS cybersecurity representative sat to his left, their expression unreadable. Karina was positioned on Rachel's right, maintaining her usual composure. What you're dealing with, Braddock began, extends beyond this HOA or even this neighborhood. The group you identified? They have been operating in clusters across several western states. Rachel acknowledged this with a nod. They exploit delayed accountability, focusing on local homeowners associations, retirement communities, and gated suburbs. Braddock indicated a tablet. They create a facade of authority, use regulations as weapons, and target individuals who don't conform, typically those with out-of-state license plates or who appear different, particularly if they move in without drawing attention. They went beyond establishing a false authority, Karina stated. They were collecting information. The DHS representative looked up. Your residents had passive thermal tags. That is not homeowners association technology. It's surplus military-grade equipment. Braddock leaned forward. Here's the part you're likely to find concerning. He indicated a flag communication from 6 months ago. One of our side channels detected it, but it wasn't initially prioritized. He slid the document across the table, a printout of an encrypted email chain with the subject line, New resident, confirmed background, CIA link. Rachel read it silently. Someone was investigating me before I even closed escrow. We believe so, Braddock stated. While they weren't entirely sure of your identity, their discomfort was evident, and the harassment began swiftly. It was a probing of limits. And if I had strongly opposed it, she mentioned they would portray me as the instigator. He confirmed this. It's a recognizable sequence. They instigate reactions, then amplify the pressure. They deliberately accumulate records to suggest instability. Karina added, they've underestimated this individual. Braddock offered a knowing smile. That's the consensus we've been receiving. This extended beyond individual grievances it always had. The situation Rachel encountered wasn't a simple dispute between neighbors. It was interwoven within a broader structure that relied on unspoken agreements. Following the meeting, as they headed to the car, Karina questioned the outcome. Do you believe this will hold now? With the charges and the exposure? Rachel responded, they'll suppress some of it, shielding the homeowners. Details will be concealed. But someone is observing now. It's no longer hidden. That evening, back at home, she retrieved a long untouched, dusty photo album from her bedroom closet. The album contained pictures from past projects, some with unclear faces and others cut from international newspapers. Among them was a faded photograph of her mother standing in front of their house in Paterson, New Jersey, during the time a neighbor attempted to initiate eviction proceedings due to a zoning issue. She had resisted, steadfastly, and ultimately prevailed. That determination persisted. As dusk settled, Rachel stepped onto her porch once more. This time, she wasn't alone. Several neighbors, those who had previously avoided her, were walking dogs, watering plants, and acting as if they didn't notice her. A man across the street offered a small wave. She made no response. Not yet. She settled, crossed her arms, and gazed out at the cul-de-sac she now perceived distinctly. Not as a haven, but as a reflection. I used to think I could simply buy peace, she said aloud. Karina, having returned, responded while looking at her phone. You still can. It simply costs more than many anticipate. They remained in silence for a considerable time. Within the building, the cameras continued to record events. This wasn't due to an expectation of further incidents, but because detailed records were now essential for safety. Although the immediate danger seemed to have subsided, Rachel understood that the situation wasn't resolved. True success wasn't achieved through a single apprehension or a single exposure. It was about refusing to allow herself to diminish. A week later, the neighborhood had resumed its familiar routine. Lawn services were operating again, and children were riding their bikes. However, a palpable sense of caution lingered, particularly near the Carrington house. Some people offered waves, others deliberately avoided looking. A few seemed to desire an apology, but lacked the words to express it. Rachel didn't wait for them to decide what to do. Each morning, she worked from her home office, Her evenings were spent tending to the garden, which she had neglected since moving to Meadow Creek. She began walking around the neighborhood again, not out of obligation, but because she was able. Influence wasn't solely about defense. It was about existing openly without needing authorization. Karina arrived one evening, carrying a folded lawn chair and a chilled bottle of mineral water. "I thought I'd keep you company," she said. They sat quietly for a while, observing the sky transform into a gentle orange hue. "I've been thinking," Karina stated. "Why do you think they were so bold? I mean, they didn't know who you were. But still, they didn't need to know." Rachel responded. "They just assumed I wouldn't fight back." Karina nodded. "Because most people don't. Because most people can't." They paused, letting the observation linger. It was an accurate assessment. Not everyone has a federal contact on speed dial. Not everyone has decades of tactical training. Not everyone has a Karina 2 doors down. And that's the point. The situation in Roseville extended beyond mere bias or intimidation. It involved a framework that facilitated individuals acting as gatekeepers, cloaking themselves in manufactured authority, fabricated concern, and deceptive neighborly gestures. They had established a functioning system. This system persisted until someone disrupted the established pattern. Afterward that evening, Rachel composed a letter at her desk. The letter was not addressed to the HOA, nor to her neighbors, but to a young woman she had yet to meet. Someone who would eventually confront a similar circumstance. She wrote, "Don't wait for permission to have space. Claim it, subtly if possible, forcefully if necessary. Expect resistance. But remember, they consistently underestimate what they don't comprehend. Retain records. Maintain composure. And most importantly, remain present, even when they desire your absence." She folded the paper, placed it within a journal, and slid it onto a shelf beside her badge. Not an award, not a recollection, a prompt, because this extended beyond a porch or a fence or a neighborhood rulebook. The narrative explored the lengths individuals would take to safeguard their perceived reality, and how swiftly that perception crumbled when someone asserted themselves and resisted conformity. The following Sunday, a community announcement circulated detailing a town hall meeting intended to rebuild faith and openness regarding neighborhood regulations. Douglas Varnell's name was discreetly eliminated from all HOA documentation. There was no formal justification provided. Rachel wasn't invited. However, she attended regardless. She positioned herself in the back row, remained silent, and simply listened, not to the spoken words. Regarding the atmosphere, however, the hesitant coughs, the measured language, the alteration in stance upon noticing her presence. Later, as she departed, Leanne Price approached her. "I wasn't aware the situation escalated to that degree," she remarked, adjusting her handbag strap. "We simply sensed something was amiss." "What was amiss?" Rachel inquired. Leanne paused. "I suppose I hadn't anticipated you would be so ready. I didn't anticipate needing to be." They remained there briefly. Then Leanne gave a short nod and walked off. This wasn't reconciliation, but it signaled the beginning of a reckoning. That night, Rachel posted a single sentence on her infrequently used social media account. "Politeness won't save you, but preparedness might." It quickly became widespread within days. People were no longer simply observing the drama. They were recognizing the underlying pattern, and perhaps, just perhaps, understanding it was time to disrupt it. So if you've reached this point, keep this in mind. Resilience isn't always about direct action. It can be found in a chair on a porch. It can be seen in a camera angled perfectly. It can be heard in a voice that remains strong. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe. Someone else out there needs to experience it as well. The dog appeared to be solely for emotional support, but when the child performed a quiet signal, the dog revealed a truth that had remained unspoken. The courtroom in Toledo, Ohio, felt overwhelmingly large for her. 8-year-old Tanya Ellison sat upright in her chair, her feet dangling above the floor, holding the leash of her golden retriever, Milo, firmly in her hands. Her braids were neatly done, and her pink barrettes made a quiet clicking sound with any head movement. She spoke little, showed no signs of nervousness, simply remained still and observant, appearing remarkably composed for a child in a room filled with unfamiliar faces, awaiting a discussion of subject no child should need to comprehend. Beside her, Milo remained motionless as well. He sat close, his eyes partially closed, his comforting presence against her leg. Many assumed the dog's purpose was to ease her anxiety and provide a sense of security within the imposing environment. And while that was a contributing factor, there was a deeper significance, far more than met the eye. From a bench, Judge Mark Halbard looked down. He was in his 60s, his gray hair thinning and his glasses perpetually sliding down his nose. Throughout his career, he had presided over numerous cases, gang violence, difficult family court proceedings, and even widely publicized trials. However, something about this young girl held his complete attention. Perhaps it was the calm focus in her eyes, or perhaps it was the dog, or maybe it was the fact that not a single person in the courtroom, even the defense attorney, was able to elicit a reaction from her. The room held a considerable number of people, enough that quiet murmurs occasionally arose as someone moved closer to whisper. Seated on the left was the defendant, Russell Banning, a man in his late 40s with short hair, a pressed shirt, and his hands carefully placed in his lap. His lawyer repeatedly tapped a pen against the table, anticipating the cross-examination. Tanya had not yet glanced at Russell. Kendra Ellison, her mother, was seated 2 rows back, quietly holding a tissue in one hand and a cross necklace in the other. She hadn't uttered a word since entering the building, simply keeping her gaze fixed on her daughter, hoping the moment would quickly pass. She feared it wouldn't. Judge Halbard then cleared his throat. "Mrs. Ellison, are you ready?" Tanya glanced at her court-appointed therapist, who offered a slight nod from the front bench. She did not return the smile, only offered a single nod. "Yes, Your Honor," the therapist responded on her behalf. "She is ready." The judge nodded briefly and turned to the bailiff. "Bring the witness." A door opened to the side, and 2 officers entered. The man accused of changing Tanya's life walked deliberately to the stand, attempting to appear calm, but his eyes repeatedly darted toward Milo, and Milo, who had been entirely relaxed until that moment, raised his head. Tanya didn't react, though her hold on the leash became a little firmer. No one observed it. The prosecutor rose, straightened her jacket, and started her questioning. "Mr. Banning, can you state where you were on the night of August 14th? Russell moved closer to the microphone. "At home, watching TV. "Alone?" "Yes." "And do you expect us to simply accept that?" He relaxed against the chair. "I'm being truthful." From the visitor's area, Kendra's hand squeezed the tissue once more. Tanya avoided his gaze, yet her breathing altered a delicate, regulated rhythm, as if deliberately cultivating composure. The interrogation continued, initially focusing on establishing sequences of events. Then, the photographs were presented, images that should never be displayed in a courtroom. Tanya averted her eyes. Milo moved nearer to her. The atmosphere in the room diminished. The weight of the moment was palpable, not from the spoken words, but from their absence. Russell subtly adjusted his position. He asserted that her account was fabricated, interrupting the prosecutor's subsequent inquiry. "That dog," he commented, "is simply trained to respond. This entire situation is a fabrication." At that moment, Tanya deliberately raised her hand, positioning it behind her back. She then tapped her fingers twice, gently. The movement was subtle, barely perceptible. A missed blink would have meant overlooking it entirely. Milo's ears immediately rose. However, none of the individuals present anticipated what he would do next. Approximately 2 months prior to the court proceedings, Tanya was seated on a folding chair in her aunt's backyard in Decatur, Georgia, observing Milo pursue a red tennis ball across the lawn. The sun was beginning its descent, bathing the surroundings in a golden hue. She held the ball in her hand, but refrained from throwing it. Not yet. Her aunt, Carla Newsom, stood nearby with her arms crossed, a gentle smile gracing her features. Carla was resilient. A retired canine handler, she had previously worked in narcotics in Dallas before relocating closer to family. Around Tanya, That rigidity eased. Carla knelt beside her and met her gaze. "Are you certain you want to do this, dear?" she asked. "We don't have to if you're not ready." Tanya didn't respond immediately. She looked at Milo again, now lying on his back in the grass, tail thumping. Then she looked back at her aunt. "I don't want him to look at me," she said quietly. Carla nodded. "Then we'll teach Milo how to watch for you." It started gradually with simple games. Carla would often sit on the opposite side of the yard with a companion, role-playing as if they didn't know each other. If Tanya tapped her left shoe one time, Milo would remain still. If she tapped twice behind her back, Milo was trained to move and position himself between her and the person in front of her. This required consistent effort. Each day following school and every weekend, Tanya was reserved, but she demonstrated a strong focus. Milo learned rapidly. He possessed a calm demeanor, intelligence, and above all, unwavering loyalty. Whenever he noticed Tanya exhibiting tension, he would instinctively move nearer. A strong bond was forming between them, a quiet and specialized team with a shared, unspoken mission. Carla observed them from the porch, occasionally recording observations, and, at other times, allowing them undisturbed time. On one evening following their work, Carla offered Tanya a bottle of water and sat close to her. "You need to understand that in court they may question your account," she stated cautiously. "Adults often feel anxious. They resist being proven incorrect." Tanya averted her gaze. "What if I make a mistake?" Carla reassured her. "You won't. And should you become overwhelmed, that's why Milo is present." He intended for them to recall his perspective. A moment of stillness followed. Then, an unusual inquiry from Tanya arose. "Do you believe he recalls what he inflicted upon me?" Carla remained silent. She preferred not to deceive. Therefore, she responded, "Perhaps not as you do, but individuals like him retain enough to be apprehensive of the truth." That evening, Kendra arrived to collect Tanya. Her gaze was weary, posture slumped. Carla drew her away before she re-entered the vehicle. "She possesses greater resilience than appears," Carla murmured. "Ensure she isn't bearing this burden by herself. When a moment arrives, meet that man directly." Kendra acknowledged, though her lips shook. Prior to their departure, Tanya returned and embraced Carla. "Thank you," she whispered against her shirt. Carla held her a little longer than normal. The day preceding the court appearance, they conducted one final meeting. Carla wore an old hoodie and mirrored sunglasses, attempting to replicate the courtroom environment. She even rehearsed a few assertive phrases she envisioned a lawyer might use. It wasn't ideal, but it provided assistance. Tanya signaled Milo. Milo positioned himself between her and Carla, remaining steadfast, vigilant, unwavering. Carla felt a constriction in her throat. "Okay," she stated, her voice softer than normal. It was one thing to be prepared, and another entirely to witness it unfold in actuality. Back in that courtroom in Toledo, Tanya remained perfectly still. Milo, now attentive, hadn't moved since she gave the double tap. Russell Banning observed a change in his posture, moving from relaxed to protective. His head rose, his chest moved forward, and his eyes focused intently on the man seated across the room. He subtly leaned away, holding the witness stand's edge. His expression grew strained, though he attempted to mask it with a forced smile. The gesture was not returned, neither by the jury, nor by the judge, nor even by his own attorney, who briefly looked at the dog with a worried twitch in his jaw. Andrea Selden, the prosecutor, paused briefly before resuming. "Mr. Banning, you previously testified that you were by yourself on August 14th. There were no witnesses and no communication records like phone calls or text messages. Is that still your account?" Russell moved his chair. "That is what I stated, yes." Andrea approached him. "You also affirmed that you had never encountered the minor involved in this case, correct?" His gaze momentarily moved towards Tanya. "Correct. I'm not familiar with her." "Never spoken to her?" "No." "Never visited her school?" I said no. The atmosphere in the room became more subdued. The quiet rustling of papers had ceased. Every gaze was fixed on Tanya. She remained looking down, but Milo hadn't diverted his eyes from Russell. Not once. Judge Halberd leaned forward a little. Andrea turned to Tanya, her voice softening. Tanya, do you feel safe right now? Tanya didn't speak. Instead, she reached down and touched Milo's back. He didn't move, but the growl was so quiet, it almost sounded like a tremor. Just enough to be heard, enough to shatter the silence. Russell blinked. I want to be clear, Andrea stated, maintaining a calm tone. The dog had been specifically trained for her protection, under the direction of a certified canine handler. He is not reacting to anxiety, but to behavior. Gerald Lasky, the defense attorney, abruptly stood. Objection. This is speculative. Judge Halberd raised a hand. Sit down, Mr. Lasky. You will have your opportunity. Gerald resumed his seat, appearing unassured. Andrea approached the bench and picked up a small folder. Pursuant to the court's approval, I would like to present a short video documenting Tanya's therapy sessions. Permission granted, the judge stated. The screen descended behind the witness stand. A video commenced playing. It depicted Tanya in her aunt's backyard, peacefully walking with Milo. Carla appeared in the frame, portraying different scenarios. One tap, Milo remained by her side. Two taps, he advanced, his demeanor shifting similarly to how it had been in court. Following the video's conclusion, a significant silence ensued. Judge Halberd then addressed Russell directly. I have presided over many trials. I have encountered numerous courtroom dogs, therapy animals, and trained service animals. However, I have never witnessed an animal react with such immediate instinct. Russell attempted to speak, but remained silent. Tanya then raised her gaze, deliberately and quietly. Her voice, when she spoke, was gentle. He does not speak loudly. He only whispers. Andrea turned towards her with kindness. Who, dear? Tanya indicated the man on the stand. Him. A profound silence filled the courtroom. Russell rose quickly. This is a fabrication. Are you allowing a child and a dog to determine my fate? Milo advanced, his growl intensifying. The bailiff intervened swiftly. Sir, please be seated. However, Russell remained standing. He increased his volume. This isn't factual material. It's maneuvering, Milo stated, with a single distinct bark. The judge struck his gavel. Sufficient. Any further disruptions, and you will be ejected from this courtroom. Russell retreated to his chair, his face ashen. He mumbled something quietly, but it was inaudible. The jury observed intently, motionless. Tanya leaned back in her chair, her hand still on Milo's back. She remained silent. However, the truth was no longer concealed within the evidence or legal language. It was now plainly visible to all. One could sense the gravity of the situation. It wasn't a boisterous moment. It wasn't theatrical. It was silent, as if the atmosphere in the courtroom had been suddenly removed. Judge Halbert straightened his glasses and looked toward the bailiff. Let's take a 5-minute recess. He addressed the jurors. Please remain seated. The gavel struck the desk, yet there was no movement. There was no whispering, no throat clearing, only silence. Milo stood motionless, positioned before Tanya, gazing intently at Russell Banning as if he possessed prior knowledge of the outcome. Carla, positioned behind the barrier, made eye contact with her niece. She offered a slight nod, not to influence her, but to signal her presence. Weeks earlier, she had explained to Tanya that you don't need to be loud to anyone. The truth doesn't always need to shout. Sometimes it simply observes. That's what Milo was doing currently, observing, remaining still. Across the room, Russell was falling apart. He pulled at his collar, adjusted his posture, and spoke quietly to his attorney. His voice had changed, now more pointed and uncertain. The composed demeanor he's arrived with was gone, replaced by a noticeable unease. It was obvious to everyone. Your Honor, Andrea said softly, easing the strain. Could the child please stay seated here with her support animal during the break? The judge nodded. She may remain seated as long as she is comfortable. Gerald Lasky, still red-faced, leaned toward Russell, whispering intensely. But his client appeared to be sweating now. Milo hadn't moved. He didn't bark again. He didn't growl again. He didn't need to. The prosecutor approached Carla close to the bench. Was that signal scheduled for today? Carla didn't blink. It was always a last resort. She had never used it until now. Andrea nodded slowly. He must have triggered it without even knowing. She knew what to look for, Carla said. He must have done it before. Back at the bench, Judge Halbert reviewed the footage again quietly on his monitor. His lips tightened. He'd been on the bench long enough to know that not all evidence fits neatly into paper or testimony. Sometimes it walks on four legs and growls when a child is too afraid to speak. Following the recess, the proceedings restarted as if no interruption had occurred. However, a change was palpable. Your Honor, Andrea stated, rising to her feet, with your permission, I would like to recall Detective Lorna Morales to the stand for a brief clarification. Proceed, the judge responded. Detective Morales approached, her boots making a quiet clicking sound on the tile. She had been involved in the investigation from the beginning, when the available evidence consisted of a nebulous assertion and a child hesitant to articulate their account. Earlier, her statement had been concise. Andrea presented her with a printed photograph. Detective, is this familiar to you? Morales examined the image. It depicted Russell Banning at an elementary school field day, Tanya's school. He was not an employee. He was not a parent. He was simply a guest volunteer coordinated through a now-defunct mentorship program. Was this man permitted access to the children without supervision during the event? Andrea inquired. No, Morales stated directly. He was not. And was he discovered in a classroom alone with a student? Yes, Tanya Ellison. There it was. That was the moment Milo shifted again. His ears twitched. His body leaned forward just slightly, defensively again. Every juror's eyes followed that subtle movement. Andrea turned to the jury. You observe the video. You observe the training. You observe the dog's instinct. Now you see why Russell stood up again. This is absurd. This is emotional manipulation. The bailiff took a step forward. Judge Halbert's voice rose. Mr. Banning, please be seated. You're not permitted to speak again unless directly addressed. However, Russell couldn't restrain himself. She is fabricating the story, fabricating it all with that dog. Milo advanced one step, displaying no bark, no growl, only his presence. It was then that a shift occurred. A single juror, an older woman wearing a blue sweater, removed her glasses and massaged her temples. Her gaze turned toward another juror, a younger man in his 30s. A shared understanding passed between them, as if a crucial element had finally aligned. However, what followed extended beyond simple validation. It concerned revealing the truth about this man and uncovering any concealed aspects of his character. The courtroom was now engrossed, anticipating each movement, observing every respiration, each involuntary gesture, and every look from Russell Banning. The jury members were no longer relaxed. They were intently focused. Judge Halbert massaged his eyes behind his spectacles. He remained largely silent, yet it was evident a change had occurred within him as well. He had witnessed numerous defendants falter under questioning, but Russell wasn't merely breaking. He was falling apart before their eyes. Andrea stepped back to the podium, her voice even and composed. Detective Morales, did you interview any other parents who observed Mr. Banning interacting with students that day? Morales responded, yes, 3 in total. Someone reported giving a child candy without authorization. Another stated they followed a student into the restroom. Was that student identified? Morales confirmed. Yes. You could hear someone in the gallery whisper, my God. Judge Halbert did not issue a reprimand. He remained silent. Gerald Lasky, attempting to reassert himself, rose. Your Honor, this is speculative. None of those allegations were substantiated, Andrea countered. The statements remained unchallenged, each one delivered before the victim had a chance to respond. Lasky's objection lingered, but it was not sustained. He then took his seat. Andrea turned back to the judge. I request permission to recall the school counselor, Ms. Jenna Holbrook, for follow-up, she stated. Granted, replied Halbert. Ms. Holbrook approached the stand with a quiet seriousness. She appeared to be in her mid-40s, with a thin but clear voice. She adjusted her blazer and spoke directly. Following the school event, I saw Tanya on several occasions. While she was quiet, she frequently drew. Her drawings consistently featured the same man, glasses, shirt, and always positioned behind her. Andrea presented the drawing to the judge and jury. Though a child's artwork, the likeness was undeniable. It depicted Russell, with the same square glasses and jawline. Notably, next to a small representation of herself, was a dog, Milo. She hadn't encountered Milo before this, correct? Andrea questioned, but not until weeks passed. A silence followed. Then Andrea faced Russell. Mr. Banning, can you clarify how a child you assert you've never encountered described you, including your glasses, weeks prior to any legal actions? Russell's lips parted. He closed them, then opened them again. I'm unsure, he mumbled. Perhaps she's disoriented or recalling something, Andrea suggested. The jury remained impassive. The entire courtroom did. Immediately afterward, the courtroom doors swung open. A woman entered discreetly and presented a note to the bailiff. He examined the note, then proceeded directly to the judge. Halberd received the paper, adjusted his glasses, and read it carefully. His eyebrows rose a little. Ms. Selden, he stated, it seems another person has come forward during the break. A former teacher's assistant from Hickory Trail Elementary. She asserts she possesses information directly relevant to this case. She's outside, prepared to testify. Andrea turned her head slowly toward Russell. Remarkably, Hickory Trail falls outside of this jurisdiction. Russell visibly struggled, his jaw tightening. Gerald Lasky moved closer, whispering to his client. Russell dismissed him. Nobody here knows anything, he mumbled. She's simply attempting to damage my reputation. Andrea stepped away. The doors opened once more. A woman, appearing to be in her early 30s, entered. Bridget Alston, her identification tag still attached to her coat. She assumed the witness stand, took the oath, and commenced her testimony. I remember him, she stated, indicating Russell. He volunteered at our school for 3 months in 2019. We received complaints, several, but they never resulted in action because people didn't want to trust the children. Judge Halberd moved closer. Did you file a report? Yes, on 2 occasions, but I was instructed not to escalate the matter. Andrea paused, allowing the jury a moment to process this information. Then Milo made a sudden, brief single bark. Russell visibly reacted. Tanya remained still. Without raising her head, she extended her hand and gave Milo a deliberate, comforting scratch behind the ears. The courtroom now comprehended. Milo's actions weren't erratic. He wasn't displaying distress. He was reacting purposefully, naturally, and with intention. However, what remained unknown was that the ultimate determination wouldn't be derived from the documented evidence. It would stem from the jury's visceral understanding. The courtroom was no longer impartial. It had taken a position, subtly but undeniably. The atmosphere was palpable, evident in the juror's posture, the judge's gesture of pressing his fingertips together, and the measured silence of Andrea Selden, which spoke volumes. The evidence was presented, but it was the responses that resonated. Milos's, Tanya's, and Russell's cut through the surrounding tension. Judge Halberd addressed the jury box, stating, "We will break for deliberation immediately. Jurors, you will be escorted to the conference room." As the jurors rose and exited, Russell slumped heavily into his chair. A slight tremor ran through his hands, though he attempted to conceal it by adjusting his cuffs. Gerald Lasky murmured something to him once more, but Russell offered no reply. His gaze was fixed on Tanya, and she, remaining silent and composed, averted her head. Milo settled back into a relaxed posture, his body curled beside her, his head resting on her shoe, as if the storm had subsided. As if his duties were complete, temporarily, the gallery stayed silent. The room remained still, save for Carla, who rose to stretch and walked over, placing a gentle hand on her sister's shoulder. Kendra hadn't seemed to breathe since the testimony began. Her fingers were red from repeated twisting. "You did well," Carla whispered. "You did better," she responded. The jury had been absent for almost 2 hours. Upon their return, the bailiff brought the room to order. Judge Halberd appeared more weary than previously, but his voice remained firm. "Have you reached a verdict?" The jury foreman, A middle-aged man with a weathered suit and a tight jaw rose. "We do, Your Honor." The question came, "And how do you find the defendant, Russell Banning, on the count of criminal misconduct with a minor?" "Guilty," the foreman stated, the word falling with a weighty certainty. It resonated, clear enough for all present. "Regarding the count of trespassing on school property with intent to harm?" "Guilty." Russell Banning's shoulders slumped. He remained silent, offering no outburst. The outburst had ceased. Only a sense of quiet acceptance lingered. Andrea shut her binder. There were no celebratory gestures, no smiles, just a feeling of relief. Securing a case such as this doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like air flowing back into a space that was suffocated for too long. Judge Halberd addressed Tanya. "Ms. Ellison, I observe that you spoke sparingly today, but you conveyed more than many adults ever manage. And I believe you." Tanya remained composed, but she nodded. "And Milo," Halberd peered over his glasses. "I've never expressed this in a courtroom, but if I possessed a medal to award, he would be wearing it." A few people chuckled softly for the first time in hours. Subsequently, in the hallway outside the courtroom, reporters assembled. Microphones, cameras, the typical commotion. Kendra moved protectively before her daughter. "No questions today," she stated firmly. "We're simply going home." Carla opened the passenger door. Milo entered first. Then Tanya climbed in beside him. The car ride home was quiet. Carla remained silent. Kendra didn't press. However, halfway along the highway, Tanya spoke up. "Will he go away forever?" Kendra glanced in the rearview mirror. "I don't know, baby, but he won't hurt you again. That's for sure." Tanya stroked Milo's fur. He licked her hand. Upon arriving home, Carla hung up her coat and reached for the leash to walk Milo. Tanya followed her to the door. "Can I come?" "You don't have to." "I want to." Beneath a pale sky, they walked in silence. There were no cars, no barking, only the sound of gravel beneath their shoes. At one moment, Tanya paused and looked upwards. "Do you think other kids are scared like I was?" Carla nodded. Tanya fell silent for a moment. Then she inquired, "Can we teach other dogs, too?" Carla regarded her. This little girl who had once gone completely silent, now formulating plans. "Yeah," she replied softly. "I think we can." But this story wasn't simply about a dog or a courtroom. The focus was on the moment a child's experiences are finally validated, and when staying silent isn't the only path to safety. 2 weeks following the trial, subtle changes began to emerge. These weren't dramatic or obvious, but appeared in minor details that only a select few observed. Tanya was able to sleep soundly through the night without any awakenings. Kendra ceased the habit of leaving all the lights on in the house. And Milo, he stopped standing watch outside Tanya's bedroom door. He settled on her rug instead, peaceful, understanding his girl no longer needed to sleep with her shoes on. However, recovery isn't always linear. One afternoon, while Carla and Tanya were organizing dog toys in the living room, a letter arrived. Carla held the letter, glancing over to Tanya, who was now guiding Milo to stay with a simple hand signal. "You did that," she remarked. Tanya looked up. "No, we did." Carla smiled and settled down beside her. "You know what most people forget?" She continued. "Adults don't always have the answers." She paused. "But when kids speak, even if it's frightening, even if it's chaotic, it stirs something in everyone else." Tanya considered this briefly, then murmured, "I didn't think anyone would believe me." Carla nodded. "That's why your input was particularly valuable." Later that week, they went back to the backyard for the first time since Milo's training. Carla brought out an old duffel bag filled with harnesses and treats, and Tanya brought her sketch pad. She sat under the tree, sketching out commands, hand signals, and little notes only she could understand. Milo dozed nearby, one paw twitching in his sleep. Kendra came outside, holding 2 lemonades. "I was thinking," she said, handing one to Carla, "perhaps we could discuss partnering with the local shelter and see if they would allow us to train a couple of dogs there. It would be a small undertaking, just a trial run." Carla raised her eyebrows. "Are you certain?" Kendra replied with a half smile. "Yes, but I'm tired of being afraid." A few months later, They were conducting weekend sessions at a small training field in the city park. They called it signals, and word spread slowly. Parents brought kids, shelters brought dogs. Some of the children didn't talk much, some didn't talk at all. Without fail, they appeared every Saturday. Even Milo, despite his advancing age, consistently attended. He remained silent, offering no barks or growls, but observed attentively. Tanya would position herself at the forefront, notebook in hand, providing instructions in concise, easily understood steps. A microphone was unnecessary. People drew near to listen. Periodically, she would look towards Carla, seeking confirmation. Carla would respond with a thumbs up, or occasionally simply offer silent encouragement if you got this. And Tanya succeeded. Individuals who had learned about the case would approach Tanya in public. Some offered thanks, while others remained silent, simply smiling and departing. Tanya didn't require recognition. She found satisfaction in the possibility that someone, somewhere, might now be more likely to believe child. One evening, while closing up the field, Carla asked her, "Do you ever wish that day in court had unfolded differently?" Tanya looked up from brushing Milo's fur. No, not even a little. She shook her head. If it hadn't occurred as it did, nobody would have witnessed who he truly was. Carla paused. The quiet confidence she held for her niece continued to surprise her. Prior to leaving, they paused before the small painted sign near the gate. It displayed sig nulls in red, with a paw print substituting the A. This was Tanya's suggestion. Carla placed her hand on Tanya's shoulder. "You transformed something terrible into something that helps people," she said. Tanya smiled. "He helped me first," she replied. She glanced down at Milo. He blinked up at her, his tail wagging softly. He no longer required instructions. He was already prepared, and perhaps that was the intention. It's often the case that those who appear least imposing possess the most profound insights. And frequently, the most subdued voices resonate most powerfully, particularly when someone or something offers unwavering support. If you've reached this point, thank you. Consider this a prompt to pay close attention, especially when interacting with children, and to trust their instincts when they express discomfort. You may be the only person to do so. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might benefit from hearing it. Remember, there's always someone waiting to be believed.